The wind had died, but the air still stung with the dry taste of dust and blood. Colt Rayner rode slow through the fading light, his horse's hooves stirring small ghosts of dirt that floated away into the desert hush. It had been a long week. Too much sun, too little rest, and a nagging ache in his shoulder from a barbed wire fence that didn't like to stay put. He was thinking of coffee and silence when he saw something lying near the edge of the trail. At first he figured it was a dead coyote or a bundle of rags left behind by travelers. But then the faintest flicker of movement caught his eye. Colt slowed his horse and squinted. It was a woman. He dismounted in one fluid motion, boots crunching against the gravel. She lay half in the dirt, half in the brittle weeds that lined the road, her dress torn nearly to ribbons. Blood had dried in strange patterns across her pale arm, and there were bruises darkening around her throat, angry, finger-shaped marks. Her hair, once golden, was matted with sweat and sand. Colt knelt beside her and brushed the dust from her cheek. She stirred, lips parting as if to speak, but only a cracked breath came out. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath his fingers. "Hey," he said quietly. "Can you hear me, miss?" Her eyes opened just enough for him to see the fear in them, raw and bottomless. She flinched away from his touch, trying to crawl backward, but her strength gave out almost immediately. Don't touch me," she rasped. Colt froze, raising his hands in surrender. "Easy now. You're hurt. I ain't gonna harm you." Her breathing came fast, ragged. "They said no one had helped me," she whispered. "Said I was cursed." He frowned, glancing down the trail. Wagon tracks cut deep into the dirt leading west. The edges were still fresh, half a day old at most. Whoever left her there had been in a hurry. Colt's jaw set hard. "Well, they were wrong," he said simply. "Stay calm. I'm the only soul who'll help you." He moved slow, careful not to spook her, and pulled a blanket from his saddlebag. When he draped it over her, she shivered but didn't pull away. The sun was dropping fast, turning the sky into streaks of orange and violet. Coyotes were beginning to howl somewhere beyond the ridge. Colt knew they didn't have much daylight left. "I'm gonna lift you up now," he murmured. "You're safe. I promise." Her eyes fluttered shut, but she gave the faintest nod. Colt slid one arm beneath her back, the other under her knees, and lifted. She weighed almost nothing, like a child, though he could feel every tremor of pain ripple through her body. He carried her to his horse, whispering to the animal to stay calm, and managed to settle her across the saddle in front of him. By the time he swung up behind her, she was slipping in and out of consciousness. The desert stretched out endless and empty, the road home long and silent. Colt guided the horse forward, one hand steady on the reins, the other holding her close so she wouldn't fall. Now and then she muttered names, fragments of pleas, things that made no sense. "Don't let them see. Please," she breathed once, trembling violently. He hushed her softly, feeling a strange tightness in his chest. Whoever she was, whatever had happened, she'd been through hell. It took nearly an hour to reach his ranch, an isolated patch of land carved out of dust and stubborn hope. The wooden fence creaked in the wind, the barn standing like a tired old guardian. He dismounted, cradling the girl in his arms, and pushed the cabin door open with his boot. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and old pine. He laid her on the cot near the hearth, lighting the fire until warmth spread across the room. She groaned softly, turning her head away from the glow. Colt fetched a basin of water and began to clean the blood from her arms. When he touched the rope burns on her wrists, she flinched and tried to pull away. "Please don't." "I ain't them," he said quietly, his voice low and steady. "You're safe now. I swear it." Her breathing slowed, her eyes flickering open long enough to look at him properly for the first time. There was confusion there, but also the faintest flicker of trust. Colt wrapped a bandage around her shoulder and pulled a quilt over her trembling form. She was still whispering, half dreaming, words that broke his heart in ways he didn't expect. He sat beside her as the fire cracked, the shadows dancing against the rough cabin walls. Outside, night took full hold, stars burning sharp and cold. Colt didn't move. His rifle leaned against the wall within easy reach, and his gaze stayed fixed on the sleeping stranger. He didn't know her story. Didn't know who she was or why someone would hurt her so bad they'd leave her to die in the dirt. But he did know one thing. He couldn't walk away from her now. Not when she'd looked at him with that kind of fear. He'd seen too much of that in the world already. And so Colt Rayner kept his silent vigil through the night. watching over a broken girl who'd fallen into his life like a ghost out of the storm. Dawn crept in slow and pale over the horizon, spilling thin light through the cracks in the cabin walls. The smell of smoke and coffee drifted through the small room, blending with the faint scent of herbs Colt had used to clean her wounds. The girl stirred beneath the quilt, her breathing shallow but steady now. She blinked, disoriented, staring up at the rough timber ceiling. For a few moments she looked lost, caught between nightmare and waking. When she turned her head, she saw Colt Rayner sitting by the fire, his broad shoulders hunched slightly, a cup of coffee steaming in his calloused hands. His hat hung from the bedpost, his rifle leaned against the wall within easy reach. He looked like a man who had kept watch the entire night and hadn't once thought of sleep. Her voice came out cracked and dry. Where am I?" Colt looked up, his eyes the color of wet soil after rain. "You're at my place," he said simply. "Rayner Ranch. You were out cold when I found you by the road." Her brow furrowed, confusion clouding her face. "You helped me?" He nodded. "Reckoned you needed it." She tried to push herself up, but winced when pain shot through her side. Colt moved quickly but gently, his hand hovering near her shoulder without touching. "Easy now. You've got a nasty gash there. Don't go ripping it open again." She sagged back against the pillow, breathing hard. Her eyes darted toward the door. "Why'd you help me?" she asked after a long silence, voice trembling. "You don't even know who I am." Colt leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking beneath his weight. "Don't need to," he said. "You were hurt, left to die. That's reason enough." She stared at him for a moment, as if trying to decide whether he was telling the truth. People in her world hadn't been kind for a long time. She'd learned that kindness often came with a cost. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "They said no one would touch me." "Said I was cursed," Colt's eyes hardened. "They lied." She looked down at her bandaged hands. Her skin was pale and fragile, the faint bruises around her wrists telling more than words ever could. "You don't understand," she said. "If they find me here—" "They won't," Colt interrupted, his tone steady as a mountain. "And even if they do, I've handled worse." The quiet confidence in his voice made her chest tighten. No one had spoken for her in so long. After a long pause, she said softly, "My name's Lila." Colt nodded once. "Colt Rayner." She gave a faint, trembling smile. "That sounds like a name out of a story." He shrugged. "Ain't much of a story worth telling." For a while, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled and a soft wind brushed against the walls of the cabin. Outside, the sound of cattle lowing in the pasture floated through the open window. It was a peaceful noise, the kind that made a person forget the world beyond the hills. Lila's voice was barely more than a whisper when she spoke again. "They were lawmen. At least they wore the badges. But they weren't right. They came to Wellspring Inn looking for someone. Said I'd seen too much. I told them I didn't know anything. They didn't believe me." Colt's jaw tightened, his knuckles white around his coffee cup. "Marshall's men?" he asked. She nodded weakly. "They dragged me out of town, beat me, said no one would dare touch me again. Said I'd die out there and it'd serve me right." Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to shed. "I thought they were right. I thought I'd die alone." Colt set the cup down, his voice low and certain. "You ain't alone now." Her breath caught. For the first time, she looked at him without fear, only disbelief and something fragile like hope. "You don't even know what kind of trouble I bring," she said. He gave a small, tired smile. "Trouble's not new to me, but leaving a soul to die, can't say I could live with that." The light shifted across his face, softening the harsh lines of it. He looked older in that moment, not from age, but from years of carrying things no one else wanted to carry. Outside, the sound of distant hooves echoed faintly. Lila stiffened, her fingers clutching the quilt. "They'll come for me," she whispered. Colt rose from his chair and crossed to the window, scanning the far hills. His hand rested on the rifle, leaning against the wall. The sky was clear, but a thin trail of dust moved along the horizon. He turned back to her, calm and steady, just as he had been the night before. "Stay calm," he said, voice quiet but sure. "I'm the only soul who will help you." And though fear still trembled in her heart, the certainty in his words anchored her. For the first time since the world had turned cruel, she believed someone might actually mean it.